again everyone, and once again welcome to another lesson in PE and Health. And you guys know who it is. This is your one and only PE Sensei. And just like I've said, we are gonna learn something new in this semester, and that something is a certain sport that is very familiar and famous in our country. And the reason behind that is that it originated or it is invented here in the Philippines. And that certain sport is none other than Arnis. So in this lesson, we are gonna learn all the things that you need to know about Arnis, from definition of terms, categories and competitions, and a little bit of history before we jump to all the fundamental skills around Arnis. And without any further delay, let us now jump right into it. Okay, so let's talk about Arnis. So Arnis is also known as Escrima or Kali, but the most popular name among these three is Arnis. And Arnis is a weapon-based martial arts where we use rattan sticks or baton sticks, which we also call yantok, and some bladed weapons like swords and daggers. And since Arnis is a martial art, it is primarily used for self-defense. And since it is weapon-based, the mode of attacking or the mode of offense is not through punch or kicks, but by slash and thrust. As for defense, we use parrying and disarming and a little bit of grappling. And also, did you guys know that Arnis is now our national sport? Yes, it is no longer sipa. I remember when I was in elementary, back then our national sport was still sipa, but in 2009 Arnis was proclaimed as our national sport, and the one who proclaimed it is none other than our former president, Mrs. Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Okay, next let's move on to the governing body of Arnis. So when we say governing body, they are the ones that set the rules and regulations. They're also the ones that set the standard equipment and apparel for the sport. And also, they are the ones that held the world-class or international competitions. And also, they are the ones who ranked the athletes. So, the governing body of Arnis was Arnis Philippines back then. And since this name was too boring in 2007, they changed it into the Philippines Escrima Kali Arnis Federation or PECAF. It is always important to know the governing body of the sport that you like or the sport that you practice. For example, in basketball, we have FIBA. In volleyball, we have the FIVB. And for cheerleading, we have the ICU. Okay, next, let us move on to the history of Arnis. But before we get to that, let me give you a quick trivia about Arnis. Did you know that Arnis is also known as the deadliest martial art around the world? Why? Because unlike any other martial arts, where you can only knock out or immobilize your opponent, in Arnis, all of the skills and technique or movement are always lethal. They always go for the kill. Even the fundamental skills in Arnis, all of them can be very, very lethal. So for the history of Arnis, just like I've said earlier, it originated here in the Philippines. But the year or when it was invented was not documented because it was used by our ancestors in our ancestral times. So back then, they don't have materials or equipment to document such events. So the first time when Arnis was successfully documented was in 1521. And in this year, this is where Ferdinand Magellan first came here in the Philippines. And when we hear the name Ferdinand Magellan, we can't help but to think of the name of our first national hero, which is Lapu-Lapu. And we already know that Lapu-Lapu successfully drove off the forces of the foreign invaders, killing Ferdinand Magellan in the process. And we were described as fierce warriors who are very skilled with our weapons. And the fighting style that they used is none other than Arnis. But then again, the Spaniards managed to colonize our country, but they are still afraid of our own martial arts, Arnis. In fact, they were so scared of it that Arnis became prohibited in the time of Spanish colonization. And the reason behind that is they fear that if more and more people learn Arnis, it can be very useful in our rebellions and we will have a higher chance to overthrow them. And back in the days, we also have what we call Arnis deathmatch. So it is basically a duel to death. And back in those days, death matches are legal. So they have fighting pits for it. And to describe it easier, it is like sabong, but the participants are people. But in 1945, it became illegal. So that's it for the history of Arnis. And now we will move on to talk about a certain or a very important person in the sport. And that is none other than Mr. Remy Espressos. So, Mr. Remy Espressos was born in December 19, 1936 and died in August 28, 2001. He was an Arnis expert and he was also a black belt in judo and karate. Remy Espressos is also known as the father of modern Arnis. So Remy Espressos is like the Bruce Lee of Arnis because he modernized Arnis in a very similar way on how Bruce Lee modernized Kung Fu. Now we have many categories in different competitions. We have many set of rules and regulations in Arnis and a very unique and simple pointing system. And it's all thanks to Remy Espressos. Now let us move on to the different Arnis competitions. So first we have full contact, and under full contact we have the padded stick and live stick. So the difference between these two, as you can see here in the picture, is the weapon that they are using. And aside from that, they're also different in the way on how the players battle each other. So first, let's talk about padded stick. So in padded stick category, it is very similar in fencing, where the first one to touch the opponent or to hit the opponent with their weapon gets a point. On the other hand, we have the live stick categories, where it is very similar in a boxing match, because in live stick category, the players will have to hit their opponents and defend themselves per rounds. And the player who can knock out their opponent or gain more points after all of the rounds will win the competition. Okay, so our next competition or category is called Anyo, or the Arnis routine. So under Anyo, we have three categories, and those categories are described by the weapon that they are using. And our first category is single sword category. Next is dual sword, and the last one is a sword and dagger, or espada y daga. And finally, let us look at some of the terminologies in Arnis. So we have Arnisador, which is an Arnis practitioner. Pugay means salute. Kanga is a grandmaster's uniform. Baston is rattan sticks, or just like I've said earlier, it is also called as yantok. Espada for sword. Daga for dagger. Punyo for the handle or grip of the weapon. And sinawali is weaving or movement. In the further lessons, we will learn how to do or execute some sinawalis. And last one is mano a mano, or unarmed combat. So to end this lesson, let us look at some of the Arnis influence in different Hollywood movies. So first one is Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon, where he fought some of the bad guys using not just the Arnis martial arts, but the two baton or rattan sticks. Next is in the scene or in the final fight in Fast and Furious 5, where Toretto versus Shaw, they battle in a parking lot using or hitting each other with metal scraps and iron wrenches. And the movements that they used in that scene, especially Jason Statham, because Toretto or Vin Diesel just use brute strength. He just hits or keep on hitting using only brute strength without any skill or martial arts. But the character of Jason Statham or Shaw the movements that he used are all based on Arnis movements. And for our next example, we have a superhero in Marvel. And can you guess who this superhero is? He wears green costume and he used 2 baton sticks, and that is none other than Kick-Ass. And we also have Hit Girl showing off his knife skills using a balisong or a butterfly knife. And for our next example, we also have Deadpool. So when Deadpool uses his dual sword or dual katana, and those movements, or most of the time the movements that he used, are all Arnis martial art movements. And that's it for our lesson. I hope you guys learned a lot about Arnis and you guys are able to appreciate Arnis even more. And good luck on your lesson, Ingenio. And let's wrap up everything with our closing segment called The Health Trends. Hello again guys and welcome back to Health Trends. And for this health trend, did you know that artistic competitions used to be included in the Olympics? Yes, you've heard it right. There used to be art competitions in the Olympics. And these art competitions have 5 categories. We have painting, sculpting, architecture, literature, and music. And the reason behind that is that the founder of the modern Olympics, Pierre de Frey, believed that Olympic Games shouldn't only measure one's athletic capability, but it should also measure a person's artistic knowledge and creativity. And with his beliefs, artistic competitions were included in the Olympics from 1912 up to 1948. And from the start, the artistic competitions had been great since it attracted thousands and thousands and thousands of viewers whenever the participants showcased their artworks in a designated museum. Sadly, the artistic competitions were removed in the Olympics, and the reason behind that is that some of the IOC or International Olympic Committee protested that all of the participants in the art competitions were already professional artists, where the rule says that only amateur level artists or participants are allowed to join the Olympics. But then again, sadly, after the meeting, the members of the IOC have decided that the artistic games should not be included in the Olympics anymore. And that's it for this week's Health Trends. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one. Ciao!